All right, my incredible Chris. Looking forward to connecting with you guys today. It's been a little bit longer than I had wanted to do part three for this live read today, but here we are. And, it's kind of heavy material, this particular book we're doing Love Bite, alien interference in human relationships. So it is a bit of a heavy topic for sure as we're going through this book through each of the chapters is giving different examples of people's experience with alien interference within their relationships, what some of these kind of interferences might look like. And we're going to do part three today, which is going to be chapters 10 through 15. So we're going to get through chapters 10 through 15 today. And this is the final chapters going through the different stories and experiences that others have gone through, just kind of as they're sharing of their experiences. And I again invite you as you watch this material, definitely shield up, utilize your discernment. Sometimes this kind of information can be a little bit triggering, and if it feels triggering, just go ahead and turn it off and maybe come back to it another time, or take whatever triggered in order to maybe be able to share that with others, talk with someone else about it in order to see if it is a catalyst for helping to uncover maybe some memories or experiences that is causing that triggering. A lot of times the triggering is basically signifying something for us that might be dormant or might actually be out in the open. You already know about it. That is just a little bit difficult to still process through our emotions, our thoughts, and our feelings. So, with this particular book, it is helpful to have a journal or a notebook as you're going through it so that you can maybe jot things down as things kind of stand out for you. Maybe you can jot it down, reflect on it, let that be something to come back to help you with. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for sharing this live experience with me. I love being able to just connect with you guys and share sacred space together. I think it's very special for us to have these kind of interactions and maybe get to contemplate some of these things together that, we could read on our own, but at the same time, sometimes in the collective space, more reveals itself. So, with that, let's go ahead and dive right in to chapter 10. So, within this, we're going to start with chapter 10. Again, this is the book Love by Alien Interference in Human Love Relationships by Eve Lorgan. I highly recommend you pick up this book. You can either get it as a hard copy or a Amazon Kindle book if you'd like on Amazon. You can go ahead and grab it from there. So, with so much love, let's get started with chapter 10. Janice and Alex. So within this, let me just grab this one last thing over here. Janice and Alex. The story of Janice and Alex brings together two married couples. Janice is a happily married, attractive blonde in her early 30s and a mother of three children. She has had alien encounters most of her life. Her husband Bob is not an abductee, although he is sympathetic to her problems. Overall, her encounter seemed pleasant, and she was never threatened by her experience until her son, a kindergartner, reported that he saw skinny boys in shiny suits wearing sunglasses and walking through the bedroom wall at night. From that day on, she began to pay close attention to her own experiences and to her child's security. Were the aliens after her kids? Janice began to wonder about the coincidence of mutual dreams. Can closely bonded humans have similar dreams on the same night without direct contact? One is reminded of ESP stories and the fictional Corsian brothers, but it's hard in But in hard experimental research conducted at the University of Minnesota in the late 1970s, many twins raised apart from birth were found to process similar likes and dislikes, similar dreams, and mate selections, even identical toothpaste choices. Janice noted triangular bruises and microscopic puncture wounds on her body, and she developed deep anxieties about the alien abduction phenomena as a negative event. Janice planned to attend my UFO support group to meet other abductees and to get some answers. She also began to pray for an answer from the higher powers. Please, God, why me? Please let me remember. Instead of a direct answer to her prayers, the aliens distracted her with a projected image of a new lover. This lover met all of her romantic ideals and deepest emotional needs. Caught off guard, she didn't know she was so needy. She thought her husband Bob was perfect for her. She had no desire for another man, and yet inner psychic needs began to change beyond her control. Further in the dream, she saw herself standing at one end of a beautifully landscaped garden. Other people were busily coming and going. The passerby made no comment, but Janice vaguely remembered a line of poetry from T.S. Eliot. People walking to and fro speak of Michelangelo. It was as if they were in another dimension and she was caught in some kind of virtual reality. In her recalled dream, Janice became aware of standing next to a tall, sandy haired man with a mustache. He wore a leather flight jacket, and when their eyes met, Janice sensed that this was her dream lover, and it wasn't Bob. His hazel eyes smiled at her. She loved him deeply as if they had known one another for years. She felt happy and overjoyed and thought to herself while looking into his eyes, do I know you? The couple seemed to be connected at a deep soul level. Janice then saw several tall, robed aliens watching from a distance, seeming to approve of the connection. At that moment, Janice was so overjoyed that she had finally met the man that she had been looking for all of her life that she forgot where she was, and the dream suddenly ended, leaving the image of this perfect lover clearly imprinted in her mind. She became upset, almost devastated that the dream ended so suddenly. How would she find him again? Jenna spent the next several days trying to keep the dream imagery alive, the man's face fresh in her mind, but it continued to fade. Intuitively, she knew this man was real and she must find him. 2 weeks later, Janice attended my abductee support group. She was a bit skittish about meeting other abductees, thinking they may be crazy and she didn't want to be associated with them. On the contrary, Janice discovered that the people in the group were just like her, normal people with families and typical jobs. At the group, Janice spotted a very tall, sandy-haired man sitting at my kitchen table sampling my heavenly homemade chocolates. The more she looked at him, the more she thought to herself, no, the man from my dream? At the break, the tall man sensuously brushed against her hip and asked, where do we know each other from? At that moment, she knew it was him. She began to tremble and had to excuse herself to smoke a cigarette outside. She stayed outside for several minutes, desperately trying to calm herself down. The anxiety was almost uncontrollable. Janice was afraid to go back to the group. She did not want Alex to see her so emotionally disheveled. She returned to the group reluctantly as the meeting reconvened. It was apparent to me that Janice and Alex were in a quandary as how they knew each other. I've seen this happen before at support groups and wondered if a love bite would soon develop. They exchanged phone numbers at the close of the meeting, and at the same time, Janice was too embarrassed to tell Alex of her dream. As if physically concerned, Alex said, I don't know if I should tell you or not, but I think I remember you from an abduction dream. Janice continued to tremble from the duration of the meeting. She decided not to tell Bob of her experience with Alex. This failure to divulge the truth began a long series of little white lies and deceptions, which eventually created a rift in their 8-year marriage. The lies also cover up a number of secret meetings with Alex. For the month following the group meeting, Janice couldn't concentrate. She developed insomnia and caught a nagging cold and that dragged on for weeks. She was in love with a man she didn't even know, a total stranger. She loved her husband, but it was a mystical kind of love, one that couldn't be easily disregarded. It was a gift of love sent from heaven. Even though Janice was happily married, she now became totally obsessed with her dream lover. Janice and Alex called one another on the telephone and talked as long as possible every day. Alex was strongly attracted to Janice as well. Although he was happily married, he found ways to be with Janice. The compulsion to be together was irresistible. They loved each other so much they would die for one another. It was as if their souls were enmeshed. As the love-bitten pair shared personal experiences, it became apparent that the aliens, or some intelligence acting behind the aliens, had set them up together, possibly since childhood. The psychic links and synchronicities were amazing. Alex could pick up on what Janice was feeling and would call her, and Janice could feel his thoughts. Their conversations revealed a shared abduction dream, which they eventually realized was a memory planted by the aliens. In the dream, they saw a child they parented together. In another shared realization, they saw Alex undergoing a neck and spine operation, a possible alien implant procedure, which allows the aliens to control monitor the subject through the pons in the brainstem, the nerve-rich portion of the central nervous system that marks the transition between the brain and the spinal cord. Could this operation have modified Alex's brain chemistry in subtle ways? So many questions. Alex put up an unusually strong struggle during the implant procedure. The aliens, who rarely met force with force, achieved their deceptive goal by using Janice, or at least her cover screen, to comfort Alex as he went through the procedure, thus increasing the strength of the bond between them. For Janice, the sound of Alex's voice had a profoundly tranquilizing effect. On weekends, they were unable to communicate due to family obligations. These weekends seemed to last for days. Although futile, now that both had been love-bitten, they actually tried to avoid speaking on the phone, writing notes, or meeting in obscure cafes, but their compulsion to embrace and to look into each other's eyes was almost intolerable. It was as if they were addicted to one another. For Alex, the addiction took the form of smelling her perfume, which delicately masked her body scent. To be out of contact had the effect of a progressively building tension for both victims. When they couldn't talk for days or weeks, it became a near crisis situation. Vacations away with their own families were nightmares. The withdrawal was excruciating. It was like a drug addiction. The strong bond between Janice and Alex started to create tension in both of their marriages. Even though they had not crossed the line of sexual infidelity, the passion was becoming increasingly difficult to suppress, and it was growing disruptive. They secretly met on one occasion, which forced them to take major steps. Alex's compulsion to have sex with Janice grew to such a fever pitch that Janice's willingness to receive that perfect passion was so overwhelming that they decided to avoid direct contact thereafter. The alien bonded pair suffered great emotional pain, eventually decided to temper their relationship and to see each other only once each month and with witnesses along so no sexual compulsion could be acted out. By this time, both spouses were fully aware that Janice and Alex had something going on. Janice became depressed. The monthly meetings were not sufficient. She wanted to cross the sexual line, but she realized there was an addictive quality to the love obsession. Even so, the flame for Alex was never completely extinguished. My support group was helpful, but it simply was not enough. Her depression deepened, and Janice, on the brink of suicide, realized she needed one-on-one therapy and probably medication. If she didn't get medical help as a means to cope with her feelings, she thought she would die. She began counseling with a qualified therapist twice a month. In addition, she stayed with my group and was able to empathize with others in the same situation. This outreach helped her gain perspective on her overall situation and insight into the seriousness of alien manipulated obsessions. It took more than a year for Janice to come to a sense of balance. By this time, Alex grew uninterested and seemed switched off. This hurt Janice, but she always knew their love relationship was just an orchestrated drama that was somehow serving the aliens. However, the aliens did not give up. They matched Alex to another targeted love bite partner. In one of my support group sessions, Janice shared a recent abduction dream in which she saw Alex being set up with another very beautiful woman. This image evoked a great deal of jealousy in Janice. During that contact, the aliens communicated that the bonding between she and Alex will no longer be useful to them. Janice wanted to stop this from happening and protested to the heartless aliens on the ship, but they simply ignored her pleas. The medical doctor gave Janice a prescription for Paxil, an antidepressant, and for the next few months it helped. Luckily, her husband was aware of Janice's abduction experiences and made efforts to understand. Had Bob not been such a supportive husband, the marital relationship might have dissolved and Janice might have easily taken her own life. The aliens eventually switched Janice off too. She described this switching off process as a release from the feelings she once had for Alex, but she also lost strong, passionate feelings for Bob. This change in her obsessive feelings happened literally overnight after an abduction dream. In spite of the seeming rejection, Bob stuck with the relationship, hoping their love life would return to normal. Janice eventually told my support group that she was able to stop taking the Paxil and was no longer inhibited by that insatiable need for Alex's presence or voice. Now that Janice was getting over Alex, she was able to look back and observe how things happened. She went through hypnotic regressions for the purpose of finding out what may lie behind some of the abduction bonding dreams. In one dream, the only thing she remembered was being with Bob when they were first dating, in which she wanted to make love. This urge was thwarted by her parents coming home suddenly. She realized that the operating screen was the premarital petting theme with her fiance. Behind the screen imagery, Janice's insight revealed an alien chemical setting where she and Alex were being watched like puppets in some romance tragedy. Once Janice got to the core memories of these bonding encounters, she admitted that she felt used by the aliens. It was not such a romantic, rosy picture after all. Realizing this truth, Janice became annoyed with other abductees support groups and internet list groups who sugarcoat the abduction phenomena. She wondered how many other experiencers of extraterrestrial contact and abductions were, in actuality, deceived. She wished she could have told Alex of her discoveries, but now he was already long gone. Alex was transferred to another town and the two lovers never met again, but Janice continues to dream about him. So that's a pretty intense chapter there for sure. So that was chapter 10. And within that, we can definitely see the level of manipulation, and we want to recognize, because it can start to make us question literally every relationship we've been in. And one of the things to recognize is there's variations. You will know if you are one of the individuals that has gone through abduction types of experiences. Then you would secondarily want to start to be very objective to the experiences that happened and realize that anything that starts to feel like a drug, like an intoxication, or like an obsession is a clear signal that there would be something deeper to look into. So that's just an invitation with that for sure. So let's continue on to chapter 11. MIA or Mia, sorry. I'm seeing the three-letter agency here, so I just went right for it all the way. Okay, Mia and the FBI agent. The Mia Adams story first appeared in her book, The Exiles. The updated material presented here was obtained from personal interviews. Mia Adams, a single woman in her early 50s, claimed to have been in contact with an alien intelligence throughout her life. She had no history of psychotic ideation, held a salaried job, and she lived a normal life in Fort Lauderdale life. In 1988, her dreams and waking images intensified, and she was compelled to research the UFO phenomenon to the fullest. In 1994, Jordan, an FBI agent, was sent to investigate a complaint about a disturbance in Mia's condominium complex. Normally, the FBI would not investigate a domestic problem, but this particular call involved and uh, this particular call involved an ex-FBI agent, and the FBI wanted a background on the case. Jordan and Mia first met face to face during lunch to discuss the problem. Their conversation ranged from the complaint at hand to mutual interests in the U.S. Jordan disclosed that while working for the FBI, he sometimes investigated UFO reports and X file material. Jordan's manner was charming, professional, and intelligent. He expressed a genuine interest in Mia, which surprised her, as he was 20 years her junior. The following day, Jordan called Mia to discuss details of the case that he had come to investigate. His candor and friendliness towards Mia almost caught her off guard. His expertise, gentlemanly manners, and risky job fascinated her. Jordan graduated from Duke University, had been involved in naval intelligence and the CIA. Although impressive, Mia remained reticent about trusting too quickly. She was not interested in developing any kind of relationship that could lead to sexuality because 2 years prior to meeting Jordan, Mia had decided to remain celibate, primarily so she could concentrate her efforts on spirituality and personal growth. Jordan called Mia often, sometimes several times a day, just to chat. Mia sensed that Jordan sent out a voice that indicated he was interested in getting romantically involved. She maintained the friendship because of Jordan's interest in the UFO phenomena. Mia wondered what Jordan's true motives were and thought that his entrance into her life could be a setup of some sort of involving surveillance. She had, after all, become moderately immersed in UFO research. Mia had been able to confirm through a private investigator named Andy, that she was under some sort of surveillance. Andy came to her condo and swept the place for bugs. There were none, but a high and irregular impedance on her phone line indicated that the phone might be tapped. Even though Jordan was married and had 3 children, he continued to make amorous overtures towards Mia. He stated that his wife and him were on the outs and were having serious problems. Mia rebuffed Jordan's advances, but Jordan seemed to take it all in good stride and continued to call daily just to see how she was doing. Unbeknownst to Mia, Jordan tracked down Andy and implied that he would have his license revoked if he didn't steer clear of Mia. But by saying that, he made Andy even more aware that Mia was, in fact, under investigation and that Jordan was surveying her, trying to pose as a suitor or lover to find out what she knew. When Andy told this to Mia much later, they both grew very angry, and yet neither Andy nor Mia could figure out why Jordan would want to investigate her. Andy was so alarmed by Jordan's threats that he told his wife all about the incident in case something happened. One clue did stand out. While Jordan was threatening Andy, he said, "All that UFO stuff she is involved in is a bunch of crap. Stay away from her." Jordan apparently had the authority to make a threat like that, and Andy did back off, yet neglected to tell Mia about his threat until many months later. Mia decided to play coy in order to see if Jordan was fishing for anything specific. In reality, Mia had no idea what was going on. Had she stumbled across something classified in her research? Thousands of people read UFO materials every day, and usually they are not investigated by the FBI. A side note here, saying it seems the FBI has played an integral role in a number of UFO cases, specifically the Linda Curtel case mentioned earlier. In that case, an FBI officer was also roped in and used as a guinea pig. This happens often in undercover drug cases where the agent winds up addicted or abusing the very substance that he or she was sent to observe. Continuing on with the story. The next day, while on the phone with Jordan, Mia casually mentioned Andy, her private detective friend, and his confirmation that her phone was tapped. Jordan made an excuse to get off the phone quickly, but not before calling Andy a liar. Early on in their relationship, Jordan expressed a deep desire to be Mia's protector. At that time, his chivalrous mannerisms amused Mia, and she delighted in his company and friendly conversations. Jordan admitted that he believed he had some missing time episodes in his life and wondered if he also had alien encounters. As their friendship deepened, Mia and Jordan experienced daydreams of having been with one another before. Very often, either one of them could complete each other's sentence and know exactly what they were thinking. Inexplicably, Mia felt a strong psychic soul connection to Jordan, and Jordan was falling in love with Mia and told her so. He couldn't help himself. He made excuses just to visit and call Mia on a daily basis. Throughout this time, Mia and Jordan witnessed a whole variety of phone static, unusual clicks, beeps, and obvious surveillance. Meanwhile, Jordan's marriage showed signs of a very nasty breakup. His wife had had an affair years before, which resulted in her giving birth to another man's baby. Jordan had been turned off to his wife ever since, and it was only a matter of time before they would be divorced, or so he thought. Jordan sensed that his relationship with Mia was governed by fate, or what he called kismet, and seemed to be somehow set up by forces beyond their control. Their connection to one another was so strong that the romantic tension between them escalated until Mia decided to let down her guard. 2 months into the relationship, Mia had a daydream, which was out of character for her. She thought to herself, "It is time to have sex with Jordan, just to get it out of the way." When Mia communicated her decision to Jordan, he backed off. He reasoned that they were probably being watched and could be videotaped, with disastrous consequences. After Jordan rebuffed Mia's sexual advances, he made a sudden phone call from the kitchen phone. At Andy's urging, Mia routinely taped all phone messages and calls to and from her home. 2 days later, Mia was shocked to discover that Jordan's call was a fake. He acted as if he were talking to someone on the other end, but there was nothing on the line but a dial tone. Within hours of Mia's hearing the taped, faked phone call, Jordan called from his office to report he was just approached by two unidentified intelligence agents. They warned him to avoid sexual contact with Mia. They told him other information involving Mia about something that had happened in 1962. They also told him he was part of an alien experiment, a partial offspring of Mia's, and if they had consummated their love, they would have been committing incest. Jordan was not sure how true this was. The simple probability would be 10 billion to 1, so he began to investigate this incest angle. At least this is what he told Mia. Mia was skeptical because of the fake phone calls and all the other ongoing shenanigans. Jordan did not relate the entire conversation to her at that time, and this acted against his credibility. He focused on 1962, asking over and over again if she could recall anything weird that happened when she was 19. It was as if he was suggesting she should invent an answer. Jordan finally told Mia that he was aware of two distinct intelligence gathering agencies, both unrelated to the FBI, who had taken an interest in their relationship. One group perhaps working in conjunction with the alien agenda to orchestrate love matches, and another group which made efforts to break couples apart. It was as if the government was at war with itself on a secret level. A couple of weeks later, Jordan was called to do a special FBI training seminar in Atlanta. During his absence, Jordan's romantic ardor grew stronger, and so did the odd noises on Mia's phone. On several occasions, Mia noticed that Jordan's phone calls were muted. Luckily, Mia had set up her phone system to record everything onto separate cassette machine, and without question, some of the messages had been tampered with or deleted. When he returned from Atlanta, Mia thought Jordan might be flipping out. He claimed he set up an appointment with a psychologist to suggest he should undergo hypnotic regression. Upon checking, Mia discovered that the psychologist scoffed at the use of hypnosis and did not even do regressions. After Jordan's alleged hypnosis session, he called Mia, very upset, mumbling something about an encounter with black-eyed creatures who touched him. Mia did not believe any of this, but allowed Jordan to play out whatever contrived scenario he was following. She tried to console Jordan, but her efforts fell on deaf ears, and all Jordan could say was, I don't know who to trust. I didn't ask or volunteer for this. I don't want to deal with it. In later conversations, Jordan did come clean to an extent. He mentioned a missing time or uh, a vague state that took place in New York when he was a small child. Another incident that took place while attending college at Duke University in North Carolina, showing signs of paranoia. Jordan told Mia, I don't want to go anywhere near you. This is connected to you. Mia didn't know what he was talking about and was hurt by his sudden rejection. Jordan implied that she was either an alien or part alien and was somehow a major player in bizarre sagas that was unfolding for both of them. Several days later, Jordan calmed down and called Mia in a more reasonable mood. Again, he asked if she could recall what happened to her in 1962. Obviously, Jordan or his superiors knew something that Mia didn't, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. Whatever this puzzle was, it profoundly frightened him. He was able to make some sense out of the constant surveillance, problems, being moved from one place to another, especially to Houston, where he was handed his Division 5 special project. On reflection, he was beginning to see Mia's connection to the UFOs and aliens, their set up romantic attraction to one another, paranormal phenomena, and lastly, secret information pointing to their powerful soul level connection and the fact that they might be related by an alien breeding program or a human mind control program. Mia struggled to remember what might have happened in 1962. She recalled being a college student at the University of Tampa, living in the dorms with a roommate named Cheryl. One evening, Mia accompanied Cheryl to a local Tampa beach. They drove in Cheryl's seafoam blue Chevy Impala convertible. Cheryl intended to meet her boyfriend Randy there and convinced Mia to come along despite Mia's gut feeling that something was wrong about this trip. The beach was isolated, except for Randy. He was digging in the trunk of his white Corvette for some tools, grabbing a car jack. Randy walked over to a nearby boat trailer and removed the tires, stealing them right in front of Cheryl and Mia, as if they weren't even there. Fearing the police would come, Mia begged Cheryl to leave. Mia could only remember her intense fear of wanting to get out of there. She couldn't place any significance to this date or any event in 1962. Jordan was onto something, but what? Was this just another ruse to make Mia think something happened in 1962? Years later, she would discover this was a probable cover memory for an abduction scenario. Jordan kept Mia in suspense. 2 days after his mysterious phone call about the year 1962, he called again, speaking cryptically and with paranoia. He acted as if he knew they were being monitored. Jordan insisted that the year of 1962 was the center of everything. He apologetically told Mia that everything he had previously told her was true or what he believed to be true, and he apologized for his brusque and rough and tumble voice. He did not, however, recant his belief that Mia was the center of things and that she had repressed connection to aliens. Mia asked, What about your feelings for me? Were they just part of the window dressing? Jordan could only reassure her that he loved her. Mia commented, I feel like a rat in a maze run by spooks. Fearing surveillance himself and realizing that his job and pension were in jeopardy, Jordan whispered, Nothing could be closer to the truth. He promised to do everything in his power to find out and tell Mia what this mess was all about. Mia pressed Jordan for more answers. Is there connection? Is there any connection between you and me in all of this, or is this just happenstance? Jordan chuckled. There couldn't be a stronger connection. Mia was still perplexed. Then what do you think this connection is? Yes, I guess I could tell you, Jordan said. This has to do with what I mentioned the other day, the 1962 incident. Mia paused, skeptical about the differences in their ages. Were you born then? Before Jordan could answer, he hung up the phone. Mia's mind raced. Thunderstruck, she gasped, "Oh my God, it couldn't be possible." She sat there shaking her head, no, over and over. Jordan is 32 years old, Mia thought. Could this be possibly alluding to the fact that I am his mother? Could this be the cosmic connection through some kind of alien harvesting? Could Jordan be the result of my egg in some kind of alien genetic incubation? It all seemed to be too bizarre to be real. Mia could never have children. Throughout her life, Mia had problems with her menstrual cycle and with fertility. She was unable to conceive, a fact she discovered during her first marriage. Mia had no maternal instincts towards Jordan, just an inexplicably strong bond, a spiritual and a loving one, a feeling of agape, but no overt tendency towards sexuality. Jordan, on the other hand, felt a strong sexual urge. What was this all about? A few days after Jordan's whisper call, Mia received a strange message on her answering machine. A mechanical, computerized sounding voice uttered a particular address 6 times over. It was not a familiar address, but some remote truck farm with existing crops near a detention camp for Cubans and Haitians, not far from Homestead Air Force Base. There was also a radar antenna station for the Navy there. Mia couldn't see anything relevant here other than overt psychological surveillance psyops game. She mentioned this to Jordan, and he warned her not to go there. Jordan called again in a few days using a cellular phone. He indicated that Mia's distrust and misgivings about their relationship and the inconsistencies that rose between them were to be expected, as if their interactions were planned. Jordan maintained, for whatever reasons, I must operate under the conclusion that the whole relationship was a planned thing. Mia was thoroughly confused, but Jordan insisted he was on to what was happening between them and promised to tell her everything once he had pieced it all together. Within a few days, Jordan was called by government agents to visit Dulce, New Mexico, and Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. Dulce is a few minutes jet ride from Roswell, New Mexico, and Nellis is said to be the gateway area to Area 51, which is near Rachel, Nevada. Both of these sites are highly associated with aliens and covert operations. All of the places to be sent of all of the places to be sent, why was Jordan sent to these two particular enclaves? Apparently, Jordan was allowed to visit these top secret facilities because of his real rank within the FBI. It turned out Jordan was no ordinary FBI agent, and he probably knew about everything long before he quote unquote fell in love with Mia. Years later, Mia discovered that Jordan was given information about this situation and about Mia on a particular mini tour. Jordan was aware that some of what he was privy to may be disinformation, but to the best of his knowledge, he believed it to be true. The information Jordan obtained in the visit to Nellis and Dulce is condensed and paraphrased in a letter he secretly sent to Mia. The letter contained a series of consistent typos and misspelled words, as if they were some kind of binomial code, some sort of like the code supposedly inserted into the Shakespeare folio of 1614. To date, Mia has not been able to crack the code, but she is assured there is a hidden cipher in it. Jordan simply dropped out of Mia's life after the letter, and she heard him for 2 years. At the time he wrote the letter, Jordan intended not to see Mia again, but years later he decided to contact her and explained everything. Here is the letter. The letter was blacked out and sent in parts, but its substance was paraphrased as follows. Mia, there is a conspiracy going on involving government knowledge and collusion with several extraterrestrial races visiting this planet. I have been advised by government sources that my birth was the result of genetic intervention by alien beings. My real birth mother was unable to conceive naturally. In her efforts to have a child, a donor egg was obtained from another woman, Mia, in her genetic material erased from the egg, the nuclear DNA extracted. My real mother's DNA was then inserted. Then this altered DNA was fertilized with my father's sperm. I also believe I have been conditioned to seek employment with the US government. I then realized that I had been deliberately and artfully placed into contact with the egg donor mother used to conceive me. Mia, I understand this was an alien effort to determine the influence of non-tangible energy field or perhaps mitochondrial DNA factor in human emotional interaction and bonding. There are several government agents who are apparently aware of this alien orchestrated incestuous bonding drama and tried to contradict the aliens' efforts to government's interference as an effort to prevent an incestuous relationship and maintain some sense of dignity. The agents are a small faction of the Department of the Navy, or DON. The Don's purpose is to direct extraordinarily unique activities in relation to extraterrestrial EBEs, or extraterrestrial biological entities, and alien technologies, primarily to combat alien operations, which are hostile to the national security of the U.S., basically gathering and exploiting alien technologies and containment of premature disclosure of information and security regarding the alien agenda activities. The Greys are genetically similar to humans, and they are creating various human alien hybrids. The purpose is to create a hardy elite hybrid species, which would be initially capable of forming the leading elements of Grey society as well as serving a similar role in human society. The hybrids would also be able to serve the destructive ecological changes that the Greys believe will take place on Earth's near future. They would be able to survive the destructive ecological changes. The use of the bioelectronic implants is incorporated into the central nervous system of the abductees for the primary purpose of mind control. The Dong conducts extensive surveillance and monitoring of abductees who are part of an ongoing program of manipulation of the human gene pool by competing non-human alliances, the reptilian species. Apparently, the genetic manipulation was initially taken on by the reptilian species to direct certain human traits in ways favorable to the reptilians. Their main focus is in the United States and some of the allies. A leading economic and military study has determined that the reptilian efforts in this area are amounting to long-term sabotage. This is one of the reasons for the Don's efforts to counter the reptilian-directed human genetic sabotage. The alien Greys and reptilians routinely attempt to erase the abduction-related memories of those they abduct. The Dawn has exploited the Greys' mind control technology as well. Unfortunately, these same memory erasure methods are also used on government personnel in relation to work done on extremely sensitive projects such as these. However, these methods are not always foolproof, and disinformation is added to the screen memories of the individual. Some personnel are also programmed not to allow themselves to get hypnotically regressed or to be medically examined by unauthorized personnel, especially if they have implants in their body. In addition to the above, there is an ongoing program of gradual societal conditioning to accept the existence and influence of the alien presence in Earth's history, undertaken by the Dawn. This is done to prevent cultural disintegration in case too much information is leaked out into the population. I was told the Greys desire to overtly reveal themselves to human society by the turn of the century. This letter is the truth to the best of my knowledge. Love, Jordan. I actually want to pause there for a minute. That's kind of massive. So, we're reading this in 2024. Literally, what was it, 2 days ago? There was a huge disclosure that was done by the government, beginning to relay a bunch of the information of UFOs and extraterrestrial documents beginning to be talked about in open forums. You can actually go on YouTube and find that dialogue that was done. I do believe Linda Moulton Howe also kind of did a thing on it as well. But if you, this is amazing because this was all written long before even, well, obviously before this book came out, but when we think of Voyagers 1, the Voyagers 1 material, the Voyagers 1 material spells this out in absolute detail. as to the purpose of the Zetas and the Greys, their kind of battle with the reptilians, that both of them are working on different hybrid programs and so on and so forth, and their desire to create basically their own type of hybrid that will be able to basically function on this planet and in so many ways make the angelic human an obsolete version of the human form. So I find this very, very interesting in this letter, getting to read it now today with you guys. This is important. So let's continue on here. Jordan's letter came at no surprise, but its completeness was frightening, and it sounded almost like a confessional. It certainly wasn't authorized. Mia had heard of this kind of thing before. She still wanted some kind of proof. Was she being played for a sucker again? She just couldn't trust him anymore. Jordan called Mia around Valentine's Day of 1995 just to say goodbye to her. He did not want to continue the relationship because of the Oedipal implications, but he wanted to part company as friends. He could not tell her where he was going, only that he was moving far away and that he would be impossible to find. In November of 1996, Mia underwent a hypnotic regression with a professional therapist in an attempt to find out what happened in 1962, if anything. At the time, Mia still remained skeptical of the things Jordan disclosed to her in the letter. During Mia's regression, she recalled an unsettling incident. When she was 17, she was taken to a military airfield near a beach by a man named Sullivan and another unknown man. From the airfield, she was flown on a propeller-driven troop transport plane to a secret location in Mexico. Nobody seemed to know Sullivan's first name. Everybody just called him plain Sullivan or Sully. One thing is certain, this man wielded an incredible amount of decision-making power. She believes she may have been flown from MacDill Air Force Base in Florida across the Gulf of Mexico. Once there, by several suave and well-dressed men, they checked her over to see if she was right for this project. Her memory is disjointed, but she believes that during the incident she was turned over to a medical team dressed in lab coats and masks, and that one of her ovaries was harvested for its eggs. In other words, the alien obstetric technology was available at that time to extract several individual ova without harming the oviducts or the ovaries per se. She remembers a very light beam in the room. At one point, Mia remembers the Sullivan character telling her to shut up. She was then placed in a smaller plane and sent back to her hometown in Florida. She remembers two benches facing each other in this small plane and recalls hearing something about Mexico above the roar of the propellers. From that point in the regression, Mia's mind leapt forward to the next event. Immediately, she found herself in an agitated state in Central Park in New York City sometime in the mid-1960s. Mia sat on a park bench watching a small group of children of preschool age playing and giggling. A female with the demeanor of a Nazi prison guard in a white blouse and a dark skirt seemed to be in charge of the children. The woman ordered Mia to look at the children and pointed at a particular young boy. Mia resisted the woman's suggestion and said, "I'm not interested in children now." The woman in charge told Mia to look at the young boy because she will see him later in life as an adult. You will recognize him. The woman said, "You will know him by his eyes." At that moment in the regression, Mia became severely agitated and broke out of the trance. Clearly, she had run into a knot of repressed material, very upsetting stuff. Mia knew in her soul that the young boy was Jordan, and the puzzle started to come together. She wanted to believe she was making up the story about this rude character named Sullivan, but she later found confirmation of his corporal existence. One of Mia's friends present at the regression, an ex-Army officer, knew of Sullivan and was aware he was always assigned to black ops, black operation projects that were kept secret from the public. Later, the officer was able to identify the man as William Sullivan, who, during the Vietnam War, was third in command of the CIA. In that capacity, Sullivan answered to both CIA and Pentagon bosses and was supposedly also reporting directly to J. Edgar Hoover in certain projects. We know now that one of the projects was the surveillance of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King. Fascinating, you guys. Further information obtained through the Freedom of Information Act pegged the same William Sullivan as the founder of COINTELPRO, a cutout corporation using an acronym for Co-Intelligence Project as their colophon. As its name implies, COINTELPRO was, among other things, a conduit between the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and the Pentagon. The Space Administration of NASA was a Kennedy powerhouse at the time and was clearly out of the UFO loop. Valuable operatives like Sullivan rarely retire. Before dropping out of sight, he managed to co-opt staff from Houston's FBI Division 5, merge them with his loyal COINTELPRO operatives, and mold the whole group into a new super secret security agency working inside NASA. I stress this was NASA after 1968, after the Kennedy influence fell away. With his information on your desk now, could you not wonder if Star Wars initiative was not far off? Up until that time, NASA had never lost a satellite. They either blew up or went out into orbit. But after the SWI, the Star Wars initiative, took off, suddenly we have about 24 missing satellites. Are they all really missing, or were they simply reassigned? Sullivan's legacy group was so dark it didn't even have an acronym for the name, but it did have access to the entry to all NASA programs and all aspects of any work being done for NASA by subcontractors. Sullivan's internal agency survived without him into the late 1970s and included in their black bag of tricks a conduit through Lockheed for development of the Glamour Explorer, a Cold War spy ship parading as a manganese nodule mining craft. Military intelligence reports list William Sullivan as a retired officer who died alone in a mysterious hunting accident in the 1980s. But one really wonders, how can a spook of his nature die alone in a hunting accident unless he shot himself? In any case, it is doubtful Sullivan died at all, and he is probably still alive, acting as a consultant in some capacities. Rumors persist that he is in Ireland. 2 months after Mia's regression in January of 1997, Jordan made Mia a surprise telephone call. Remember that Jordan vowed he would probably never call her again, yet here he was, bright as a button. He claimed he was vexed by all that had happened and expressed a desire to reestablish their relationship. Mia no longer believed him and sensed he was still working for the Black Ops group. But instead of hanging up, she wisely took the opportunity to ask Jordan some barbed questions about the past few years of his past in general. She did not inform him that she had done a little data gathering on her own, and she specifically skipped any mention of the several hypnotic regression sessions. During their last call, Jordan told Mia about the incident in his childhood in which he was taken to Central Park in New York City with a small playgroup. Jordan dutifully told Mia where he had been since he sent the long confessional letter. In January of 1997, he was transferred from his Florida office to the FBI Division 5 in Houston, ostensibly to work with security for the Space Administration main offices nearby. Bill Sullivan was acting as CIA liaison at the Division 5 office in Houston at that time and broke away to form a cloaked security group at the space agency. Not near the space agency, in the space agency. Is this the same Sully who Mia remembers flying over the Gulf of Mexico? After 7 weeks of renewed friendship on daily calls, Mia decided to cut off contact with Jordan. She sensed a troubling warble in his voice. She again felt that Jordan was up to his old tricks and was trying to pump her for information. In their last conversation, Jordan, in a confessional tone, told Mia that he had originally been sent in to neutralize her. Mia pressed Jordan to explain what that meant, but all he said is that it wasn't to kill her. Was this just to make sure she couldn't harm the program? Jordan also confessed after several years of contact, he himself also grew suspicious about the FBI's true motives and realized that the political neutralization task could be merely a cover for whatever else he could feed back to his superiors, whoever they were. He honestly admitted to Mia that he thought he was being used to some degree for another purpose and he did not like it. He believed that the true reason had something to do with their relationship and the emotional bonding that they shared. At Mia's suggestion, they broke off all communication, and after February of 1997, she never heard from Jordan again. In June of that year, Mia discovered through a mutual friend that Jordan was dead. His obituary was printed in the Miami newspaper. Shocked by the news, Mia investigated the Houston newspaper to find the same obituary printed verbatim, almost like it was a contrived press release. Had Jordan followed the same path as Bill Sullivan? Was he really dead? Or had his identity changed? If Jordan did die, then how? The obituary gave no details. In an effort to get away from it all, Mia took a trip to New York City with a girlfriend named Elaine. Mia told Elaine about Jordan's obituary and stressed that she still wanted to know how he died. A series of coincidences transpired with Elaine, who just happened to have a friend whose son in law worked for the FBI in the Miami office and had just transferred from Houston. Elaine was able to confirm through the son in law that Jordan committed suicide. He apparently drove to the Woodland Cemetery, a bedroom community outside of Houston, and shot himself in the head while listening to the radio in the car. Mia believes that Jordan was not the type of person to commit suicide. She was unable to find out any more information until another set of synchronicities pressed themselves during the July 4th, 1997 Roswell 50th anniversary UFO conference in Roswell, New Mexico. Mia attended the conference and set up a booth near the auditorium to sell her books, The Exiles. A man walked up to her booth and struck up a conversation. Mia told the man that she had just discovered only a month earlier that Jordan had committed suicide. The man apparently was a reporter for the Houston City Magazine and was now working in a city magazine in Albuquerque. He asked Mia, "Hey, was he a young guy with a bunch of kids?" Mia answered, "Yes, he had 4 kids." "Oh God, he shot himself in the head," the reporter seemed shocked. "Several other young agents committed suicide that year, and nobody knows why." Mia's bewilderment deepened. Why wasn't the suicidal epidemic followed up by the FBI in Washington? Is suicide an occupational hazard with federal agents? Mia doubted it. Many agents work a full lifetime and take a double pension. More unexplained questions arose when Mia probed further. Upon returning to discovered that Jordan was cremated in a memorial service with no casket and his ashes were scattered by his wife and kids. No autopsy was taken. Mia still hopes Jordan may be alive somewhere. So that's quite an interesting chapter, you guys. Whew. And there's just so many things within there. I think that one is just interesting to start to kind of look at, just the authenticity of some of the names, some of the connections, even to Martin Luther King and also to the Kennedys. Interesting as we look at all of the three-letter agencies, the Pentagon, secret agencies that are involved with these things. We know that the extraterrestrials that have been here present, the Greys, the different reptilian races, they are directly working with different agencies and military forces upon the planet. You know, there's been so many stories that have come forward that I feel like it's just silly to try to keep going like, oh, well, that could just be somebody saying something. I think so much disclosure has come forward from a lot of these whistleblowers that have been talking about these things. And so it is interesting to recognize what is this hybrid program that they're doing. So this is definitely a different type of alien love bite within this last chapter. This is actually talking a little bit more into the breeder program. So different females being utilized for their eggs for these hybrid types of birth of these new types of human hybrid lines. And again, Voyagers 1 talks about that these future hybrid lines, that part of the purpose is to create a more a more resilient body form for the grays. And I feel like the reptilians have been doing this for a really, really long time. I'm actually looking forward. There's another book called Meet the Hybrids, which is just a bunch of stories sort of like this. Um, a little bit more of a colorful read maybe in talking about some of these hybrids telling their stories, and different hybrids. Some are gray hybrids, some are reptilian hybrids, some are just different types of hybrids that tell their story and their experiences as an individual that maybe would have been like the Jordan character in this story. So I don't know, you guys, what do you guys think about this and what's been going on? So these next few chapters are all a lot shorter. That was the main kind of long chapter. So we have 12, 13, 14, and 15 to still do. And so within these are all. So let's do chapter 12. This is a story of Andrew. Andrew, a single male abductee in his 30s, has had difficulty maintaining long-term relationships with women due primarily to alien interference. Andrew toured Europe and Great Britain in 1992. While visiting the Scottish Highlands, he fell in love with a beautiful, affectionate, and mild-natured woman named Sharon. 2 months into the romantic relationship, a tall, tan-gray alien and a shorter, dark blue alien in a hooded cloak visited the sleeping couple. Andrew recalled the first part of the abduction with the tan figure and remembered asking the being, "You don't want me, do you? You want her, don't you?" But as soon as he saw the tall being, feelings of fear and foreboding overcame him and the memory faded. Sharon appeared seriously distraught and emotionally distant the next morning. The look on her face was one of anger and disgust. Normally, after Sharon awakened in the morning, she would cuddle and talk with Andrew, get dressed, and silently leave with a goodbye kiss. This particular morning, Sharon immediately got out of bed, dressed hurriedly, answering Andrew's small talk with a sharp, monosyllabistic words, rarely even looking at him. Sharon's countenance bore a mixture of fear, confusion, and disgust. She quickly left the house, slamming the door behind her as if she wanted to run away from something that haunted her. Later, Andrew discovered that during the night, the smaller cloaked alien jabbed Sharon in the side with a pointy spear-like object as the entity warned her to stay away from Andrew and left her petrified. Even though Sharon found a red triangular mark on her body the next morning, she assumed it was just a horrible dream. There's an image here of the abductee's rendition of alien inserted memory imagery invoking feelings of jealousy and unrequited love. So this stuff is real, you guys. This is like a mind slide energy. So, when I do clearings or remote view into things, so many times, I would almost say 9 times out of 10, if there's a handler alien energy, they do stand just like this, just behind the person. And it almost seems like they do stand a bit kind of to the right side a lot of times when I see it. But this is something that I've seen so many times. More honestly, with reptilian races tend to stand behind like a handler like this, but this is interesting that this is his image that was in there. So let's go ahead and see what else happens with this story. Less than 2 weeks earlier, Cheryl no longer had amorous feelings for Andrew and seemed to be switched off. She soon broke off the relationship, leaving Andrew grief-stricken. A couple of months later, the aliens revisited Andrew. In his encounter, he remembered graphic imagery of his girlfriend, Sharon, being a slut, having sexual relationships with his friend, making it appear that his best friend had cheated on him behind his back. This evoked an intense jealousy, rage, and unrequited love for his ex-girlfriend, Sharon. That makes you question, you guys, how many people have had those dreams where they dream about their partner doing something and then they wake up all mad at them? It's got to make you question, right? Because especially dreams where you wake up with so much intensity in your feelings, as if Even though you know it was a dream, there's that feeling like, I don't know, but I'm still mad kind of idea in there. That's something for us to really kind of go, and think about, because a lot of that, now that we know so much more, we're realizing is this mind slide technology. So, in the next relationship of Andrew's, the aliens again interfered. At the time, Andrew was traveling the Bavarian Alps and started working at a ski resort high up in the German Austrian mountaintops. Andrew was still trying to get over the last broken relationship with Sharon and wanted to meet another woman for companionship and fun. Thoughts about the Greys were always lurking in the back of Andrew's mind. He thought that perhaps if he didn't get involved in a serious relationship, the aliens wouldn't interfere this time. He was wrong. Andrew became romantically friendly with a Dutch woman named Ingrid while working at the Bavarian resort. They spent the night together one evening and snuggled, sleeping in bed together. The tall, tan, gray aliens paid them a visit that night. Ingrid did not remember the alien visitation they both shared that night, but Andrew recalled climbing out of bed that night to open the bedroom door, and facing him was the tall, tan grays. He became upset and asked the gray aliens tearfully, "Why are you always interfering?" At that moment, Andrew turned back to see Ingrid, who was sitting almost upright in bed, her face contorted in horror, frozen to a silent scream. Then wham! Within seconds of his request, Andrew experienced intense pain and he blacked out. The next morning, Andrew noticed a dramatic change in Ingrid's facial expression and demeanor. She had the same look of disgust on her face as he had seen with his previous girlfriend's face after their alien encounter. Andrew's heart sank. He knew what this meant. Before he could even ask Ingrid what was wrong, her formerly amicable attitude changed from indifference to outright nastiness, and the love affair ended. Andrew's persistence at pressing the aliens for an answer was met with a barrage of platitudes such as, "She wasn't one of us. You are one of us. She wasn't necessary, not part of it. She doesn't understand us." And the notorious, "You are not ready to know yet." After both of these broken off relationships, the aliens projected into Andrew's mind seductive images of a beautiful exotic Tahitian woman with children, implying that this was Andrew's future wife and kids. The understood message, according to Andrew, was, "If you stick with us and do as we say, then this is what we will give you." It never happened. Andrew believes that the Greys interfere with his relationship because romantic relationships provide a strong distraction to their ultimate use for him. The aliens are akin to jealous lovers who want their abductees all to themselves for their own purposes. Today, Andrew is dating again. He remains untrusting towards the aliens and has taken extra precautions to be upfront and honest about his encounters with his current girlfriend. Even with the odds against him, Andrew maintains a positive and victorious attitude in eventually overcoming these obstacles and has had some success in resisting abductions. So another short but sweet chapter here gets right to the point of their interference, but oh, so true. This line in here, that aliens are akin to jealous lovers who want their abductees all to themselves. Oh my gosh. I've seen this so many times, and many times too, this is where they'll intrude into the dream state again many times after that. So that's definitely, we're going to be looking forward to getting to the part where we can start to see how to deal with these, right? Chapter 13, Darlene. Darlene's case demonstrates an alien orchestrated divorce, several abductions, an unusual illness, and a blatant spiritual warfare. Darlene, 35, was married to Roy for about a year. They are now separated. She has two children, teenagers from a previous marriage. Darlene did not discuss her alien abductions with Roy because she talked about them. Whenever she talked about them, he went ballistic and started binge drinking. In August of 1994, Darlene and Roy went out on a camping trip at an official lookout site on a mountainous area of Southern California. Roy had the thermos open on his lap, preparing to pour a cup of coffee, when they were both blinded by an intense blue-white light. From the vantage point overlooking the valley, they could see the light flash lit up the darkening sky for at least 5 square miles. Darlene looked at her watch immediately after the light flashed and found that she had just lost about 5 minutes of time. The late afternoon sun had set and it was now darkening into twilight. That just doesn't happen in a few seconds. Roy denied any missing time and became angry and argumentative every time Darlene mentioned it. Darlene felt as if it might have been a UFO, but Ray insisted it was just a rocket launch from the Vandenberg Air Force Base. For the next several days, Roy's attitude shifted to irritability and denial every time Darlene brought up the topic. By listening to the locals on the radio, Darlene discovered that another man had seen the same blinding light and experienced 6 hours of missing time. He described his experience to a neighbor, and Darlene figured he was situated less than a mile from where she and Roy had their coffee. This confirmed to Darlene that what they had experienced was some kind of a UFO sighting, but she didn't get the feeling she was abducted. Even with this other man's corroborating missing time story, Ray still denied the event and avoided the UFO issue. Looking back in her life, Darlene recalls that her marriage to Roy started going down the drain immediately after that short camping trip. It was as if Roy was switched off by some external energy force. Roy's personality started to shift as he became increasingly angry, argumentative, and cold. She later learned, not until her divorce a year afterwards, that Roy had become involved with drugs and began seeing other women shortly after the flash of light occurrence. In the summer of 1995, Darlene went through a major alien abduction involving a heretofore unheard of alien type. These aliens, she called them the tall pinkies. They can be described more distinctively as 7-foot tall beings with elongated balloon like heads. Her abduction experience included 3.5 hours of missing time. She recalls going to bed early one evening around 11 p.m. to awaken later, finding herself sitting up in bed, seeing the two pinkish aliens in her room. Under hypnosis, she described them as pale and almost fish-like. Their heads were disproportionate to their bodies, with huge black eyes the size of a fist. Darlene went on to describe the aliens' faces. She recalls one of the aliens looking directly into her eyes as it moved with a hypnotic effect. One of the tall pinkies kept moving close to her face, back and forth, almost like a snake charmer. This action had a hypnotic effect on Darlene, and the next thing she remembers, she was sitting up on the side of her bed. 3.5 hours were lost on the clock. She felt groggy, as if she had just come out of some kind of anesthesia. She got up and walked into the kitchen, feeling very disoriented and nauseated. She felt intense pain in the back of her head. Clumsily, Darlene bounced back and forth against the hallway walls towards the bathroom. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and she was shocked to find black and blue bruising around and under her eyes. She looked like she had just survived a head-on collision. Behind her left ear, she found a black and blue bruise as if she'd been hit with a police club. For 2 days, Darlene was sick with head pain, nausea, and fatigue. She went to the doctor's office and was checked out by the physician who kept who kept asking her if her husband had abused her. The doctor took an optical light instrument and brought it up close to Darlene's face, and as he turned on the light, Darlene immediately recoiled, screaming, "Please don't hurt me." Again, the physician asked her if she had been battered because he had seen similar responses in spousal abuse cases. But again, Darlene said no. He ordered a CAT scan, which later revealed a definite bruising and lump behind her left ear and a pocket of fluid trapped in her brain at the rear portion of her head. After the bruising behind her head and her left ear faded, Darlene noticed a newly formed lump behind her right ear. She had frequent migraines, so she went back to the doctor only to discover that the pocket of fluid still trapped in her brain was not subsiding. The doctor prescribed non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs to a mild diuretic to force the swelling to go down. This worked From that time on, Darlene experienced many health problems and was hospitalized several times for kidney stones, pneumonia, and migraines. She also studied many of these ailments in a family medical book because she had been completely without any of these dramatic health problems in her life prior to seeing the blinding flash in the mountains and subsequent abductions. The following December, Darlene underwent a midnight abduction while she was home alone. At this time, Roy was working nights and her children were away visiting friends. She had gone to bed at her normal time between 10 and 11 p.m., only to awaken to the telephone ringing. Roy sometimes called at night, so Darlene thought it must be him, but she was sadly mistaken. She answered the phone only to hear an unidentified male voice whispering in nonsensical sentence. She immediately went into a trance, robotically put on her clothes, and walked out the front door and waited. All of this was recalled without the use of hypnotic regression, but at the same time, she had no control over what she was doing. Waiting outside was a white, unmarked van with two men in the front seat. They opened the door, walked out. One asked Darlene, "We need you to step inside." The men were wearing camouflage military fatigues and drove her to an unknown location northeast of where she lived, somewhere in the Mojave High Desert. She recalled sensing the vehicle sliding down an incline, but it was at least 5 floors underground, like a large city center parking garage or an underground military base. She recalled driving down a tunnel where they stopped. As Darlene and the two military men stepped out of the van, three professional looking individuals, two men and one woman, met them. The two men were wearing white clinic garb, dark trousers, and a shiny black shoes, as if they were in some kind of military hospital uniform. The woman was also wearing a white lab coat, a dark shirt, shiny shoes, and her brown hair was done up in a chigan. They were pleasant, and the woman said to Darlene, "Good to see you again." In her dazed state, Darlene couldn't remember when or where they had met before. The three medics then escorted Darlene to an examining room and looked like a doctor's office. She recalled seeing a window covered with horizontal shutter blinds. There was also an examining table. Darlene became very sleepy and told the people, "I'm very tired. I want to go back to sleep." The woman encouraged her to go to sleep and said that everything will be all right and when she wakes up. Almost as soon as she fell asleep, a loud buzzing sound disturbed her. Darlene yelled for someone to stop the noise because she couldn't take it anymore. The buzzing apparently caused Darlene to fall back to sleep. Therefore, she remembered nothing until leaving the examining room. Upon leaving the compound, Darlene was instructed to have something to eat and drink as soon as she got home. She was then assisted up off the table, escorted back to the waiting room. The two military men met up with her again and helped her into the white van. They drove her home, dropped her off, getting out as before. As Darlene left, she said, "Thank you for bringing me home." Obediently, Darlene walked in the door and immediately went to the refrigerator and poured herself a glass of cold milk. She drank half of it and left the glass on the living room coffee table. Then she changed clothes and went to bed. She was awakened to the alarm ringing at 5:30 a.m. She then walked to the kitchen and noticed the half glass of milk on the coffee table. The glass was still cold with condensation on the edges. She couldn't remember leaving it there several hours before, so she called Roy at work and asked him why he had come home. He told her she was crazy and that he had been busy all night at work. Then it dawned on her. She remembered coming home from her strange meeting with the three lab-coated doctors. To this day, Darlene cannot recall the exact details of her visit to the secret underground facility, and she certainly has never come up with a satisfactory answer as to why she was abducted and why she went along so willingly. In March of 1996, 3 months after visiting the military underground base, Darlene started having vivid teaching dreams in a classroom setting with other students like herself. The dreams usually centered on learning mathematical concepts, scientific logic with a great deal of metaphysics thrown in. This wouldn't seem strange on the surface until we realized that Darlene almost flunked math in high school. Less than a month after her examination by the lab-coated trio, Darlene's marriage began to fall apart. Luckily, she was able to get support concerning her numerous abductions in my support group. Roy insisted Darlene stay away from the group, and the marriage took a turn for the worst. He was calloused and obnoxious. He harassed Darlene on the phone and refused to come home for dinner or to sleep. She had no idea where he was when he wasn't at work, and she noticed he was using methamphetamine and drinking heavily. It was as if Roy was acting a starring role in an alien orchestrated tragedy. Darlene could no longer live with his violent outbursts. When he was home, he smelled of stale beer and body odor. He constantly argued while stoned and generally made himself a pain in the neck. Finally, under advice from several friends, myself included, Darlene obtained a restraining order to keep Roy from harming her and the kids. She filed for divorce and was forced to move so he couldn't stalk her. He had threatened her life. During the summer of 1996, she met a wonderful older man named Will. He worked for the government, yet deliberately kept his job description vague and indefinable. He believed in the UFO phenomenon and genuinely cared about her and her kids. From the very start, Will and Darlene felt an instant attraction and shared a deep bond and genuine love for one another. Both she and Will knew it. And for the first time in years, Darlene felt truly cherished. It was not love at first sight, but the next best thing. As their trust level continued to rise, she gradually disclosed her experiences with missing time, abductions, and the flash of light. She also knew that she was at one time taken to a craft of some kind. She teased him one night by saying, "Hey, if you stick with me long enough, you'll probably see a UFO." The new couple shared much time together, taking strolls on hot summer nights. One fall evening, as the sun set, Will and Darlene saw a bright circular orb in the eastern desert sky. The light separated and broke into 5 lights and shot from left to right and then vanished. Darlene asked Will, "Did you see that?" Will stood silent, dumbfounded. They both heard buzzing and humming even after the lights were gone. Finally, he was able to stutter a few words. "What was that?" Darlene felt triumphant. "That was a UFO. I told you if you knew me long enough, you'd see one." Less than 2 minutes after they saw the lights and heard the arcing noises, they had their first close encounter of the third kind, alien contact. It was not a dream. Up ahead, towards the tree line, they both saw 2 very tall figures approaching. They were humanoid, but definitely not human. They were tall, like basketball players, at least 7 feet tall, with broad, squared off shoulders. One of the entities darted across the road towards them, while the other figure stood like a sentinel at the edge of the road. Darlene shouted, "Do you see them?" Will answered nervously, "Yes, I did, and frankly, Darlene, it's scaring the crap out of me." He paused to take a breath. "I've seen enough. Let's go." Darlene blurted out, "Oh my God, they're coming towards us." Terrified, Will said, "I can't hang with this. Let's go back now." At that point, they turned quickly, pacing back for at least 1/4 mile, while Darlene turned back and began when Darlene's back began to burn. She said, "My back is on fire. It hurts. It's hot. It's burning." As soon as she turned around, the beings disappeared and the frightened couple hurried home. As soon as she returned to Will's apartment, Darlene looked at her back and discovered a large 2-inch red spot between her shoulder blades. She called Will into the bathroom to look at it, and he took several snapshots. Within 24 hours, Darlene experienced bruising all over her body for no apparent reason, and her back still burned. She went to the doctor, who ordered several tests. He checked her back, suggesting that this could be a type of radiation burn, but was at a loss how to explain how. She told the doctor that she had had a UFO sighting, but he ignored the comment. For the next several weeks, Will was withdrawn and still upset about the UFO encounter. He also said he felt bad because he acted like a coward. Darlene told him later to tell Darlene called him later to tell him of her doctor's visit and to talk about the encounter. But Will acted coldly and told Darlene, "I can't see you anymore." The love bite had once again worked to break up a loving couple. Darlene was grieving and felt betrayed. They had such a great loving relationship just before the sighting, and now it was like Will was just shut off or had just been warned away. She wondered if it was his government job. He had once told her he had suspicions about a certain place in the Mojave Desert. They use 4 million gallons of water a day, he said. Will explained that that degree of water consumption would be impossible for a community of only 200 or so people. He alluded to the fact that there is an underground base there. A year passed without any communication from Will. Even though they both were in love, Darlene commented to me how unlike her it was to be able to get over him so quickly without recourse. Darlene was able to get over the breakup easily and became a frequent visitor to the support group. In November of 1997, Darlene located Will in a nearby town quite by chance through a mutual friend. She waited until Will's birthday rolled around and gave him a call. Although polite, Darling could tell that Will was under duress. He spoke softly, probably out of respect for the good times they had. He was curt and said thank you, like somebody was standing right next to him in the kitchen. I'm not supposed to be talking to you. His subtle admission that somebody else was running the show sent chills down her back. Will gave no explanation, but it seemed that either his life or livelihood had been threatened. Darlene knew that she was on the no-go list. Now she knew the truth. Will wasn't a coward. He probably still loved her, but he was being loyal to Uncle Sam and had obviously been contacted by some government agency monitoring Darlene's encounters. Twice before this had happened to others in my group. Why were these particular abductees in need of watching but not others? What were the spooks looking for? Other reports came back to me from reliable sources. Apparently, the government felt somebody in my group was of great interest to them and was keeping tabs on her from other female abductees in the area. Why? And how did they know? In the summer of 1997, I contacted Darlene to ask her if she would like to accompany me and my associates, Jane Bartley, to visit a Las Vegas abductee support group. I had hoped Darlene would tell her abduction stories that shed light on some of the military and other types of abductions. James and I had made some beneficial connections with this group and were invited to do a presentation on our recent research findings. These findings involved reptilians and the distracting spiritual warfare tactics conducted by the aliens. People were most interested in what the ultimate strategy might be. What, for example, have they to gain by wrecking marriages and heterosexual relationships, especially ones that are working so well? And conversely, why would aliens bond two unmarried couples together only to create emotional chaos in their lives? I called Darlene several weeks before our scheduled trip to Las Vegas, and she did want to go. But as the time approached, I had difficulty getting through to her. She had a new male roommate who wouldn't give her our messages. Sadly, we thought he might be another bad love bite setup sent in to continuously distract her from our research efforts. We were both probably wrong and being paranoid, but in any case, Darlene was incommunicado, and that frightened some associated with the group and the Las Vegas preparations. The week before our Las Vegas trip, I discovered that Darlene had suddenly come down with a severe sore throat and a respiratory infection. Weeks later, we discovered that Darlene had a life-threatening form of pneumonia. By the time she had gotten to the doctor, her lips started to turn blue, and within 20 minutes of entering the doctor's office, she was rushed into the emergency and put on a respirator. I did not find out until after we returned from Las Vegas that Darlene had another near-death waking vision in her hospital room on 2 separate nights. A spiritual warfare attack involving witches and alien beings. One could easily ascribe these visions to a high fever, but Darlene did not have a high fever. A simple phone call told us that Darlene had been admitted to the hospital on the Friday we left for Vegas. That evening, while in her hospital room, she became aware of the spirit bodies of two black witches reciting incantations. They were holding black candles and wearing black hooded robes and red sashes. Darlene had seen these witches before in a spiritual warfare attack the preceding summer. She got the distinct feeling that they were putting a hex on her. They reminded her of the witches in the opening scene of Macbeth. Darlene cried out to Jesus, Jesus, help me, over and over again. And as she called out, she saw the two angels at either end of her bed as if they were protecting her. A nurse named Shelley entered the room asking what was wrong. Darlene replied, I feel an evil force in this room. The nurse said, okay, then let's pray. So the two prayed, and the evil feelings began to dissipate, and Darlene went back to sleep. Darlene was awakened again when the nursing shift changed. Another nurse entered her room and saw that Darlene was awake. This nurse was tall and slender and asked Darlene condescendingly, oh, so I hear you're a born-again Christian. Darlene, this nurse spoke to her in a derogatory tone. Darlene answered, yes. The nurse continued, well, what church do you go to? Darlene told her the name of her local church, and the nurse mocked her. Do you think your church is going to help you? Darlene defended herself by stating that she has thousands of people praying for her now. Her mother put out a request to a national prayer line at the local church. The tall nurse folded her arms and huffed, well, it's not going to help. At that moment, Darlene said the nurse's eyes changed, appearing cold and dead, like a corpse. Darlene intuitively knew that the nurse was a Satanist. The nurse pressed on. Do you claim that Jesus is your Savior? Yes, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, Darlene replied. Well, I don't serve that God. Darlene defended her faith. Well, there are only two forces, good and evil. The nurse's eyes deadened and went cold again. Darlene did not want that nurse coming close to her, let alone touching. The respiratory therapist entered the room at that point and assisted Darlene with her treatments. The next day, Darlene's heart began to show signs of congestive heart failure. The doctor told her the pneumonia bout that she went through had left her heart muscles weak and expanded. Meanwhile, Darlene's blood tests and laboratory cultures came back from the lab. This time they were not missing, but the doctors had a great deal of trouble diagnosing the results because they seemed to fit no known pattern. One symptom indicated a viral infection, and yet interferon B and several other treatment modalities had no effect. Further tests for viral infection, including a battery of Epstein-Barr tests and an HIV panel, showed nothing out of the ordinary. As far as current hematology was concerned, Darlene's blood was normal. The doctors were unable to identify any virus or bacteria responsible for her sudden and dramatic illness. They tried 3 different strong antibiotics, and nothing could shake the infection responsible for Darlene's pneumonia. The progress or the prognosis looked bad, and the doctor said that if this continues, Darlene had only a 10% chance of surviving. The daytime dragged into evening as Darlene struggled to breathe, losing her energy. She drifted in and out of sleep. Later that night, Darlene sensed an evil presence back in her room. This time, Darlene saw clairvoyantly their spirit bodies, 3 witches reciting incantations again. Darlene also noticed 2 small gray aliens and a 4.5-foot tall reptilian coming through the wall. Darlene could feel her life energy being drained out of her body, and she intuited that her life was in severe danger. She again cried, Lord Jesus, help me. Unexpectedly, an angel with a bright white sword, probably an image of Saint Michael, appeared in the room and commanded the witches, she is the Lord's, you cannot have her. With one quick swoop of the sword, the angel cut off the witches' heads, all 3 of them. The aliens scurried and dispersed through the wall like cockroaches running from the light. With all her might, Darling got out of bed, ripped the IVs from her arm, and struggled to get out of the room. Her blood squirted everywhere as she grabbed the sheets to cover her bleeding arms. As she got close to the door, she felt an invisible force field keeping her away from the door. While crouched on the floor in exhaustion, the door opened. The witch nurse entered the room, saw blood everywhere, and stared at Darlene with those same cold eyes. With every ounce of effort, Darlene screamed, Don't touch me. I know what you are. Stay away from me and take your goons and demons with you. The witch nurse walked closer towards Darlene. As she got near, the nurse was violently thrown back against the door. St. Michael appeared again, and the windows glowed with a heavenly light. The nurse's eyes popped open in an abject terror, and at that moment, the head nurse entered the room. Darlene warned her, Get that woman away from me. She's a witch. The dark nurse quickly left the room. Darlene requested to be transferred to another room. Judging from the state of her arms and the blood all around the room, the hospital staff decided to put her under 24-hour observation in the ICU. From that time onward, Darlene was determined to get out of the hospital as soon as possible. She knew she was not crazy. She called her mother and begged her to take her home. She thought for certain that she would not live another day if she remained in the hospital. The next day, Darlene's mother arrived and had her transferred out of the hospital. The doctor later admitted that during the first week that they had almost lost Darlene 3 times and didn't expect her to live. During her last couple of weeks in the second hospital, I called Darlene to ask how she was doing. She told me of her terrifying ordeal, the satanic nurse and the aliens in the room. She also mentioned St. Michael and his saving grace. It seemed as if a forceful entity simply did not want her to attend the Las Vegas UFO meeting. I suggested we pray over the phone and said, next time this happens, try this. At that moment, the phone died. I hung up, redialed, and the telephone number, and it kept ringing. No answer. I called the hospital to ask what happened, and I finally got reconnected again on the phone. Luckily, we were able to finish our conversation in prayer. I visited Darlene during her last week in the hospital, and I was glad to see her improve. She had suffered damage to her aorta from a congestive heart failure, and the doctor said that in 5 years' time she may have to undergo major replacement surgery. Although Darlene has recovered, she still experiences frequent bouts of pneumonia and continues to have abduction-related activity. She is more cautious about love bites, yet maintains a good attitude and strong spiritual foundation. Wow, her story is intense, you guys, right? Um, that's a blend. Oh my goodness. So that chapter we just did, chapter 13 with Darlene, that's kind of blending a few different things and definitely touching into something a lot of people just don't want to look at as well that goes on upon the planet, and recognizing a lot of these reptilian forces, these hybrids. The grays are interesting because if you listen to a lot of stories, they in some ways are kind of seen like drone-like beings. So every kind of alien race kind of has their grays that kind of work for them, especially the shorter ones. But the reptilians have a huge connection to the satanic forces. And so I find it interesting in that chapter that they even started bringing up that energy within there, that tie-in. So that's just another thing to contemplate, you guys. We just have a few more pages within here, and we have chapter 14. John and Nadine. This case demonstrates an alien-involved bonding which relied heavily on telepathic communication. John is a 41-year-old married man who has undergone at least 5 abductions by the small grays. His abductions began in childhood and may have included his older brother, since both can remember episodes of missing time. Many of John's encounters involved musical tones and alien symbols, and because of these experiences, he believes he developed a talent for music. During his teens, he became obsessed with learning as many instruments as possible. Later in adult life, John found some of the symbols that he had seen in his childhood in a book entitled Abduction by Debbie Jordan. This flashback triggered his recall of several abduction scenarios. John's life changed dramatically in 1983 after he experienced a series of vivid precognitive dreams. Each of the dreams showed him walking and talking with the same beautiful woman. He knew nothing about her, which is Nadine, except that she lives in a house in a rural property. In 1984, John began to dream of another woman, Janet, whom he later met and married in 1990. Nadine turned out to be the future wife of his work associate, but it wasn't until 1989 that all three would meet and discover their unique connections. In 1987, John worked for an air ambulance company in Hayward, California, a sprawling bedroom community in the San Francisco Bay Area and due east of Silicon Valley. Janet worked for the same charter company, but in 1987, they only knew each other as fellow employees. In 1989, John read Whitley Strieber's first bestseller, Communion, a historical book about the Strieber's own abduction experiences. His associate Tom saw the book one day and commented that this was the same book his wife was reading. About 1 week later at lunch, Tom and John started up a conversation on the topic of UFO and abductions. John was still secretive about his early experiences, but Tom was forthcoming about his wife Nadine. Tom said, Nadine claims she was abducted and had similar experiences to those described in that book you left on your desk last week, but frankly, I think she's making it up. John said, "Oh, well, lots of people have had these abduction experiences. They just don't talk about it." "Yes," Tom said, "but I think she's making it up." Tom paused as he finished his sandwich. I'll have her call you. See what you think." About 3 days later, Nadine talked to John at Tom's request and they discussed personal experiences. John told Nadine about his dreams of a woman in 1983 and the details of the house and the surrounding property of the dream. John's perfect description of Nadine and of Tom's summer house in the mountains near Chico in Northern California shocked her. Tom had never described his home to John. Within weeks, on December 19, 1989, John and Janet drove up to Chico to visit Nadine at the Chico house. On that particular day, Tom was out of town. Nadine had planned for John and Janet to spend the day, and other guests were to arrive in the evening. As John parked his car, Nadine's golden retriever Goldie ran forward and jumped in John's lap before he could even get out of the car. The dog behaved as if he knew John, greeting him with slobbery kisses. Now, a lot of dogs do this if they like someone's smells or the sound of their car, but Goldie was an old crotchety dog who had abandoned acting like a puppy many years earlier. Nadine can't remember when she last saw her loyal companion act so affectionately towards a stranger. Throughout the day, John and Nadine shared stories of alien encounters, compared coincidences, and agreed that their meeting together seemed pre-planned. At 5 p.m., John heard electronic music playing while he was in the bathroom. It seemed to come from the ceiling area. In the kitchen, Nadine also heard something akin to music, but Janet did not. In reality, there was no radio or stereo anywhere in the house. They figured it might be some neighbor's kids playing their radio at an unusually high volume, but this also turned out to be untrue. The neighbors were not home. A half hour later, John saw three small lights flash from outside of the living room window. These lights were spaced in a triangular pattern about 6 inches apart, one red, one blue-green, another white. John pointed out the lights to Janet, but they blinked out before he could even finish his sentence. Immediately, Nadine said, "I know. They're here." At that point, Nadine suggested that they take a walk outside, but John didn't want to go outside in the woods at night. Things were getting a bit spooky. The three talked about it for a while, and at 6:15, Nadine again suggested they go for a walk. At that moment, Janet stood up and said she was tired and abruptly decided to take a nap, which was out of the character for her. At 6:30, John and Nadine took a stroll through the pines and the manzanita thicket while Janet napped in the upstairs bedroom. John felt uneasy the whole time, feeling like they were being watched. Somehow, it took an hour just to walk 50 yards, which didn't make sense. By 7:30, John and Nadine began a timorous walk back to the house. As they approached the house, they could finally see the path and felt relieved, but not for long. Before they could reach the house, they were stopped dead in their tracks by the sight of a dozen small, multicolored lights suspended in the air above the house, twinkling as if they were small Christmas lights. At the sight of the lights, Nadine started crying and John's knees began shaking. Scared and concerned for Janet's safety, John and Nadine both said, "We must hurry inside. Janet is alone." As they started walking towards the house, the multicolored lights started to blink off one by one. For some strange reason, John and Nadine stopped short of the house and instead of going into the house, leaned against John's car. It was as if they were being mesmerized by the blinking lights. At that point, John recalls Nadine making two bizarre comments. Janet didn't pass because she can't have babies. Tom didn't pass either because he had a vasectomy. That's why Tom can't see them when they come. They're going to ruin it for you and Janet. You aren't supposed to be with her. They're trying to break Tom and I up. Later, when John asked Nadine about her comments, she completely forgot saying anything. This short-term memory loss is indicative of post-abduction behavior. By the time John and Nadine got back to the house, it was nearly 8 p.m. Janet was still asleep and seems to have been aware of the lights. John went upstairs to check on Janet. She was very groggy and asked what happened outside. Before John had a chance to answer, the phone rang and Nadine's other guests announced that they were on their way over and were waiting at the general store 5 miles away. The property was so remote, someone had to be dispatched to guide them through the woods to Nadine's house. Janet decided she needed to freshen up, so John and Nadine drove the 5 miles to meet the guests to lead them into the 25-acre property. The only entrance was a small gated road which can hardly be seen at night. About 2 miles down the road, Nadine saw a streak of light bolt past the car. John slowed to a crawl and then noticed a red, baseball-sized light following the car. Visibly upset, Nadine began crying. After a short while, the red light disappeared into the woods. As soon as they met the guests, Nadine calmed down and changed the conversation to other things. Nadine figured that their guests were not interested in UFO stories. Besides, she wanted to forget about it anyways. At 10:30 p.m., all of the guests had arrived, several with cars who knew how to navigate the road back to the main highway. They socialized outside on the front deck of the house and were distracted to the sounds of low flying helicopters, but none to be seen. At this time, John recalled hearing Nadine's voice in his head saying, "I wish they," meaning the other guests, "would leave." For a brief moment, John and Nadine were aware of each other's thoughts, as if they were having a telepathic conversation. The party was supposed to go on for a few more hours, but in the few moments the guests left, one by one, as if they were being mentally directed to leave by some unseen force. After the guests left, John, Janet, and Nadine went to bed in separate bedrooms. Before retiring, John noticed that his pager battery was on low. This was odd, because he had just put in a new battery the day before. During the night, John felt a ghostly hand gently brush his hair and forehead. He bolted out of bed immediately and didn't sleep the rest of the night. On returning home the following day, John called Nadine as soon as possible, only to discover she was deeply depressed. Clearly, she was frightened and hated to stay at the Chico house alone. Goldie the dog had been no match for the aliens if they decided to come back, but she was also concerned about John and told him she felt that they had been abducted because she was experiencing the post-abduction exhaustion and uneasiness. Later that night, John awoke several times and discovered he had lost 3 hours of time, and his pager battery was dead again after having placed new batteries in it. A side note here saying John and other abductees have noticed that after alien activities, batteries on various appliances become drained and fresh light bulbs will burn out. Continuing on. From that time onward, John and Nadine called one another on the phone daily. They became quite close and shared a strong psychic bond, intuiting each other's thoughts and feelings. Nadine developed a sudden burning interest in Native American spirituality, and John was compelled to study everything he could on ESP and psychic phenomena. Every so often, they visited and shared their research and copious notes on these feelings. Through their research and visits, um, Nadine and John started remembering more of what transpired during their missing time experience. Both recalled being told by the aliens that they must learn how to communicate telepathically, and that they would have to do this because they would soon become separated. John visited Nadine at her home several times, but Tom started to get jealous. It made working for John and Tom tense and on edge. John and Nadine decided to stop calling and writing each other and to let things die down, but their bond was so strong that they could easily communicate through darshan, a Sanskrit word for what we call distant viewing and telepathy. John and Nadine toyed with this possibility of romantic ideation but refrained from a physical relationship. John's friendship with Tom remained strained at work, and afterwards, at that time and afterwards, Nadine and Tom's marriage grew unstable. John and Janet began dating and were married the following year, and Nadine and Tom moved away to Seattle. This confirms what the aliens predicted. Nadine eventually divorced Tom and remarried, and afterwards lost contact with John. In late 1995, the request of a close friend, John underwent a hypnotic regression to uncover some of his abduction episodes in missing time. He discovered that he had an encounter involving Nadine before December of 1989 on her property in Chico. Small gray aliens in tan uniforms orchestrated John and Nadine's joint abduction. These same aliens were the ones involved in John's childhood abductions. He intuitively knew and remembered under hypnosis that he and Nadine had been together several times. I believe the aliens put them together so that they would meet later in life. Under hypnosis, John remembered that they had been together and found out that they had lived only a block away from one another as children in the Bay Area. Before they separated, Nadine told John that the aliens were trying to set them up as biological mates for reproductive purposes. She knew the aliens would try to break up her marriage with Tom, which they eventually did, albeit in Seattle. John and Janet's relationship remained solid. John also found out later that Janet couldn't have children, confirming Nadine's previous comments about what the aliens told her. At the time, John and Janet were friends, and even after began dating, John had no idea that Janet could not conceive children. In our final interview, John said, "In some respects, I am incredibly angry at being subjected to these experiences. Yet because of them, I have come in contact with some very good and honest people whom I otherwise would have never met or had a chance to meet. Also, if it were not for my experiences, I never would have come in contact with the members of an abductee support group. In the 5 years I have watched it grow, it has become a fairly close-knit family, and I love them all as if they were my own family. My experiences did make me take a hard look at myself, and I did not always like what I saw. I believe I am a stronger person for it. At times, it still scares me, and I have to go around the house to make sure all the doors and windows are locked tight. But I have a supportive wife who helps me through the bad times. For that, I am truly blessed. In a case This is a case where the aliens tried to break up two couples, but John and Janet's strength was strong enough to resist the aliens, and proves to me that the aliens' manipulated setups can be overcome. So that's pretty amazing. And here's the last one. Suzanne, chapter 15. The following case demonstrates how the aliens work through sleeper operatives and trained infiltrators to observe UFO groups. The sleepers feel they are doing mankind a service, while in reality they are being used to spread misery, chaos, and misinformation. Oh, man. I'm sure this will be a good one. The sleepers is a big thing. I think a lot of us are a lot more aware of that. So let's definitely see how this chapter goes. And this is the final story. This is the final chapter before we get into the levels of talking about how to deal with these kinds of influences and situations. So this is the story of Suzanne. Suzanne is a lifelong abductee, having contact with various greys and reptilians. She is a devotee to alien encounter research and runs a support group for UFO experiencers. Suzanne spends a tremendous amount of energy organizing the group and hosts occasional lectures with special guest speakers in the UFO community. She is spiritually oriented and wants to take a positive approach to the alien presence and their activities, yet she is traumatized by her own alien encounters. She has a number of reptilian sexual assaults and psychic rapes, and feels that her reptilian handler is possessive of her. At times, the sexual encounters with the 7-foot tall reptilian male are shrouded by pleasant screen memories, and sometimes she thinks these attacks may be coming from her own past life experiences as vivid dreams. In several therapy sessions, she had discovered that cover memories were implanted in her mind to hide the reptilian rape. As Suzanne networked and learned more about other abductees, she became more skeptical of the overly spiritualized positive view of the aliens. Suzanne underwent hypnotic regressions, rebirthing, and various modes of counseling to bring to light her fragmented abduction memories, some of which were very traumatic. Eventually, she started to share her discoveries with members of the support group. Marie, a new, very friendly contactee, considered herself psychically gifted. She joined the group and began to bond with Suzanne. She often performed psychic readings for New Age groups, in person and over the telephone. Marie and Suzanne hit it off, and coincidentally, Marie was looking for a new place to live. Suzanne just happened to need a roommate, so Marie moved in. At first, Marie appears positive and supportive. She offers free psychic readings to some support group members over the phone, and as time goes on, a rift begins to appear. Marie, in typical New Age fashion, believes the space beings are helpful spirit guides, possibly even gods or angels, who are here for our spiritual development and evolution. Suzanne, having seen far too much misery caused by alien abductions, is convinced they are for the most part malevolent and dedicated to the dominance of the human spirit. Marie channels a being called Sananda or Ashtar and started charging people for readings and workshops. Suzanne saw this as a conciliatory gesture, but all the while the channeling was going on, Marie was raiding Suzanne's client list for psychic readings over the phone. Suzanne became furious with Marie when she discovered the breach of ethics, but more importantly, Marie managed to convince about half of the list that Suzanne's attitude towards the aliens was wrong, and that the aliens bring the message of peace and goodwill. Suzanne realized that Marie has a Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde personality and realizes Marie may be dissociative. In other words, she may be going through what psychologists call fugue state amnesia, which usually leads to a diagnosis of a multiple personality disorder. It is important to realize that this is not a psychotic case. The person with multiple personality disorder is not crazy. They are not schizophrenic. Neither of the personalities is really split from reality, but in most cases, the personalities do not know about each other. In other words, the personalities disassociate from one another. Although once very rare, this disorder is now well documented and is categorized in medical terms as dissociative personality disorder, or DID, usually caused by early severe trauma, or in this case could be trauma-based mind control techniques used by Project Monarch or MK Ultra. That is a huge thing, to actually recognize that that is actually the multiple personality. Oh my gosh, and I'm forgetting the term of it, but it is a fraction of different identities that is definitely orchestrated through another level of the abduction experience. The MK Ultra thing is definitely connected to that. In the long run, Suzanne saw that Marie's metaphysical platitudes masked a frightened, anxious, and angry woman who could not deal with her own alien encounters. Marie really didn't know what happened in most of her alien contexts, but believed it must be good for her. Why, if the abductions were so good for her, does she maintain a persistent undertone of negative energy? Why would she steal my confidential list? Suzanne wondered. Other people in the support group made similar comments and noticed that Marie was draining their energy insidiously like a psychic vampire. Stretched to the limit, Suzanne asked Marie to move out. One weekend, when Suzanne was away speaking to abductees, Marie finally moved out, but not after creating chaos and infighting in Suzanne's local support group. While Suzanne was away, she met another reptilian contactee, Tina, who claims to be psychic. Tina, like Marie, feels the reptilians are really good and have done numerous positive things for her. Tina spoke positively about her male reptilian handler, who she claims never assaulted her, despite waking up with claw marks, and gave her special assignments. She tells Suzanne that you can have anything you want as long as you do the assignments they give you. Tina has not ever had any extensive therapy or hypnotic regressions to uncover her alien encounters. Suzanne is appalled at this growing naivety in the abductee community and set a resolve to delve further into the alien agenda. When Suzanne returned home, she discovered that Marie has moved elsewhere, leaving a mess behind for Suzanne to clean up. Marie also converted the utility bills to her own name and shut down all of the utilities when she moved out, leaving Suzanne without electricity or water. Shortly thereafter, Suzanne discovered that the UFO support group had effectively split apart and that Marie had been unconsciously working as a sleeper operative for months to undermine Suzanne's efforts. Suzanne contacts James and I, and we presented our research finding to a gathering of her remaining group. During our visit there, Suzanne's new roommate, Jody, an informed and intelligent abductee, claims to have been contacted by a NASA operative who tried to get her to take part in a mind control project. Jody avoided the agent, but he was persistent, eventually offering a lucrative, easy job. In spite of this temptation, Jody ignored him and he finally gave up. We were not sure whether to believe Jody or not, but considering Jody's background in the Air Force, at one time working on a secret project, we gave her the benefit of the doubt. She was being recruited so that Jody and Suzanne could be more easily monitored. This is always a question. The next morning, Jody and Suzanne looked outside towards the parking lot, only to see an unidentified man in a white coveralls searching. The man became aware that he was spotted and peeled out in a white van. To avoid future problems and violations of their privacy, Suzanne and Jody moved to another town and took steps to disguise their identity. Suzanne is deeply disappointed at the loss of her support group and is rebuilding her network of contactees. So, that was a whole lot. The sleeper thing is quite wild, just in how that can play out for individuals. So we'll have one more read of this, you guys. Um, What do you guys think about all of this? It is pretty wild because again, there's all of this talk of wanting disclosure, right? We want to know disclosure. And at the same time, we have to recognize, are we ready, right? It's this idea of disclosure isn't all going to be disclosure that is of, say, our benevolent guardian forces. In the idea of disclosure, the disclosure is to actually see the truth in all of it, to be able to clear the veils and see behind all of them to everything that is playing. And I do think in a lot of ways it's going to be very traumatic for a lot of individuals. So even conversations like this, a book like this is still, even 25 years after it was written, I think is still difficult for a lot of people to ingest or even want to hear this information. So I thank all of you so much for being willing to take this journey with me. Please, again, seek support if there are things that are coming up for you. Find a safe space to communicate or talk about it. Know that I'm always here and available. You can always reach out to me through my website withbecca.com. You can always find all of that information in the description below within any of my videos and any ways to contact. So with so much love, thank you so much for letting me share this with you, and I will see you at the final live read.